I've saved hundreds of lives, but the man in my ICU nearly destroyed mine by speaking a secret from my childhood that should have died with me. Nights in the unit breathe differently. Vents hiss, pumps click, telemetry whispers in green. By 3:17, the hospital has settled into its ritual of machine lullabies and fluorescent insomnia. I was halfway through a chart when the transport doors burst open and the trauma team rolled in a man who looked like he'd been dragged through rain and gravel. Male, mid-40s, the paramedic said, wiping his brow. Found collapsed under the overpass. Hypothermic, hypotensive, sats in the 80s on non-rebreather. No ID. He was mud-slick and gray at the edges, chest heaving like the air was too heavy to lift. I slipped into the practiced pace that 2 decades in intensive care carves into you. Airway, breathing, circulation. Let's go high flow, I said. Warm fluids, broad labs, troponin, VBG, blood cultures, chest film at bedside. We threaded lines into cold veins, taped cannulas, hung fluids that thudded warmth into him drop by drop. He flinched at nothing. When I pressed below his ribs, he winced and then stared past me, through me, like he was reading something on the opposite wall only he could see. "Sir," I said, leaning into his field of vision. "I'm Dr. Khan. You're in the ICU. You're safe. Can you tell me your name?" He swallowed against the mask, Adam's apple bobbing under a ropey sinew of a neck. For a long moment, there was only the roar of high-flow oxygen. Then the mask fogged with a breath that wasn't just air, it was intent. He lifted a hand heavy with tape and cannula and pointed not at the monitor, not at the nurse, but at me. His voice was a rasp dragged over stone. "You used a jar." Every muscle in my back tightened. "What?" He blinked, slow and deliberate. "Glass, green glass. Under the fig tree, by the crumbling wall." The room narrowed to a tunnel. Somewhere behind me, the mobile X-ray beeped itself awake. A pump chirped for attention. A nurse said my name. I heard none of it. Because when I was 9 years old, I wrote a note in blocky letters, folded it until it was a hard little square, and buried it in a green jam jar beneath my grandmother's fig tree by the old stone fence. I have never told anyone that. I have never told anyone what I wrote. "Sir," I said, and my voice didn't sound like mine. "Focus on your breathing." He obeyed, but his eyes never left mine. "You wrote," he rasped, words shredding with effort. "I wish you were gone." The high flow roared louder, though the dial hadn't moved. I felt my heartbeat thud in my throat, brutal and bright. I hadn't seen that jar in 34 years. I hadn't thought of it in 20. I had been a child, small and angry and ashamed. The person I had wished away is alive. The note, if the earth hasn't taken it, should be rot and paper ghosts. The jar should be legend. "How do you know that?" I asked, too soft. His lips tugged into a smile that wasn't relief or gratitude. It was recognition. "Because you asked me to take it?" A nurse touched my sleeve. "Doctor, pressure is 40 systolic." I jolted back into medicine. Norepinephrine. Start at 8. Draw a second lactate. Get warming blankets and call CT when he's stable. Orders leapt off my tongue on instinct. I adjusted the mask, rechecked the line, forced my hands to move like the practiced instruments they are. He coughed, a wet bark that shook his frame. When it passed, he leaned as far as the straps allowed and mouthed one more sentence around the plastic and oxygen. "Under the roots," he said. "Left side of the trunk. You dug with a spoon. You were crying." The chart on my tablet flickered as my vision blurred. In the corner of the monitor, his saturation ticked up to 92%. The EKG line steadied into a narrow rhythm. The body in front of me was buying time. The past he just cracked open wasn't. I stood there too long, The nurse tugging on my sleeve, monitors wailing for interventions that demanded my full attention. But all I could hear were his words, rattling through me like loose stones in a jar. A spoon, crying, the fig tree. It was more than a detail. It was exact. My grandmother's garden had been hard-packed clay, impossible for my small hands. I remember sneaking a kitchen spoon out of her drawer, kneeling in dirt until my fingernails cracked. The anger in me had been so sharp, so unchildlike, that it scared me. I buried it, literally. And no one, not my brother, not my mother, not my grandmother, ever knew. I swallowed hard and forced myself back into the present. How's that Narepi? I snapped. Coming up, the nurse said, relieved to hear me sound like a doctor again. Naps climbing? Good. Let's get the warm blankets on him. We swaddled him, covered him with silvered sheets, and the shivering began violent, almost convulsive. I reassured myself. Rewarming response, nothing more. But his eyes stayed fixed on mine through the trembling. The first labs returned pH low, lactate climbing, hypothermia plus shock. Any other night, any other patient, I'd be lost in the numbers, adjusting drips and calculating outcomes. But my head buzzed with a different equation. How could he know? As if sensing my thoughts, his lips moved under the oxygen mask again. You told me to keep it. I leaned in. What? The jar. You didn't. Bury a wish. You buried me. My stomach turned. Images flashed me at 9, knobby knees pressing into the dirt, jamming the jar into the hole, covering it with soil until the glass was gone. The note inside had been ugly and small, 4 hateful words scrawled in childish rage. I wish you gone. I'd met my father, his drinking, his rages. The nights I prayed, he wouldn't come home. I had buried that wish because I was afraid it might come true. Afraid that words had weight, that shadows listened. The man on my table coughed blood-tinged foam into the mask. His voice was a whisper of gravel. I answered. I always answer. The nurse adjusted his lines. Doctor, he's too unstable for transport. I nodded automatically, mind reeling. I always answer. I glanced at the monitor. His heart rate smoothed, pressure stabilized under the drip. By rights, he should have been circling the drain. But he was getting stronger, almost as if the act of speaking my secrets was resuscitation enough. I checked his pupils again. They dilated when they met mine, like the darkness inside him was spilling through. Who are you? I whispered. For the first time, his smile spread wider, tearing cracks at the corners of his lips. You know. And God help me, I did. Because the thing I had prayed to as a child, the thing I had begged in whispers of hate and fear, was lying in front of me, alive in failing flesh, repeating the words I thought the earth had swallowed. And it wasn't finished yet. I ordered another set of labs, more to buy myself time than because I needed them. The residents scribbled dutifully. The nurse adjusted the norepinephrine drip, but I barely heard them. My eyes stayed on the man. His body was failing acidosis, eating him alive. Core temperature still too low, but his gaze was steady. Too steady. Patients in shock don't look at you like that. They drift. They twitch. They go glassy. Not him. He stared into me like he'd been waiting years for this night. You thought the jar would break, he whispered through cracked lips. But glass keeps secrets well. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had broken that jar in my mind 100 times over the years, convincing myself it never mattered. That childhood hatred and desperation fade with time. But the truth? I'd never dug it back up. I never checked. You're delirious, I said too sharply, as if volume could drown out recognition. This is hypothermia. Hypoxia. He coughed, wet and deep, but when he spoke again, his words were clear. You asked me to take him. My throat tightened. The night after I buried that jar, my father collapsed in the kitchen, his heart seized. He lived, barely, but something in him dimmed after that. His rage, his fire, like a flame smothered. The house grew quieter, safer, and I had convinced myself it was coincidence. Just a heart attack. Now the man on my table was smiling with broken teeth, and I did. The nurse leaned close to me, whispering nervously, "Doctor, why does it sound like he's talking to you? About you?" I couldn't answer. Because I was remembering the prayer, I whispered into the dirt that night, "Take him. Take him away from me." The monitors chimed, but not with alarm. His vitals, impossibly, were stabilizing further. The drip hadn't changed, the fluids hadn't finished, but his numbers climbed like he was being filled from somewhere else. He lifted a trembling hand, reaching for me. "I gave you peace, and you never thanked me." I recoiled before I could stop myself, my back colliding with the supply cart. Metal trays rattled, the sound far too loud in the tight room. The nurse's eyes darted between us, her face pale. "Doctor, what exactly did he say to you?" I wanted to lie, to dismiss it, but my lips betrayed me. "He's..." repeating something from my childhood. The man's grin widened, as if pleased I had admitted it. He rasped one more line, soft as a lullaby. "You buried me once, Khan, but I always crawl back." And the monitor beeped again, steady, strong, like a heart that wasn't his was beating through him. The beeping of the monitor filled the silence between us, steady as a drumbeat, too steady. The nurse muttered something about unbelievable recovery, but I knew better. This wasn't recovery, it was awakening. I should have stepped back, called psych, called anyone, but the weight of his words pinned me in place. "You buried me once, but I always crawl back." The boy I had been returned to me in flashes, bare knees in the dirt, trembling fingers clutching the spoon, anger so sharp it had cut through fear. I could almost smell the soil again, damp and metallic, hear the scrape of glass against clay as I lowered the jar into the ground. Inside, it was nothing but paper, or so I told myself. But now, watching this man breathe stronger with every secret he spoke, I wondered if I'd buried more than words. "You don't exist," I whispered, the words catching on my tongue. "You're a coincidence, just delirium." His laugh was low, broken, like gravel sliding. "Coincidence doesn't crawl under fig roots. Coincidence doesn't answer a child's prayer." My skin prickled. I didn't pray. His eyes gleamed, dark and wet. "You did, with tears in the dirt, with words sharp enough to cut. You asked me to take him away. And I did?" The nurse's voice cracked through my haze. "Doctor, should we page neuro? He's making sense, but not." "No," I snapped, too harsh. She recoiled, and guilt stabbed through me. But I couldn't let her call anyone else in, not yet. Because if more ears heard this, if more people recognized it, it might solidify into something I couldn't explain away. I forced my tone flat. "Just keep monitoring." She nodded reluctantly and turned to the chart. I leaned close, so only he could hear. "What do you want from me?" His lips stretched into a grin that showed cracked gums. "What I've always wanted. Gratitude. Memory. For you to know I never left." The overhead lights flickered once, a ripple of shadow across the walls. Every machine in the bay hummed louder, the cords trembling like struck strings. The nurse looked up nervously. "Power surge?" she asked. But I knew. The air carried the same electric weight I remembered from that stormy night in my grandmother's house, the night the window banged open, and my father's heart failed in the kitchen. He coughed again, but this time no blood came. Just words, scraped raw. "Dig, Con, dig again." See if the jar is still there. The chill in my chest hollowed me out, because part of me knew if I went back, if I clawed at that earth, the jar would still be waiting unbroken, unrotted, holding more than paper. Holding him. And now, lying on my table, he was no longer asking. He was demanding. The words hung in the air like frost. Dig again. The nurse must have sensed my silence stretching too long, because she spoke quickly, nervously. Doctor, his pressure's better, SATs are holding. But this doesn't make sense. No one stabilizes this fast. I forced myself to nod, to perform the motions of a physician. Check the lines, adjust the blankets, glance at the monitor. But my hands felt detached, puppet-like. My mind was elsewhere, kneeling in that garden 34 years ago, pressing dirt over glass, whispering into soil as if it could hear me. The man licked his cracked lips. You've forgotten how heavy the ground felt on your hands, the way the roots clawed your wrists, the way you whispered my name before you even knew it. I froze. I didn't whisper a name. Yes, you did, he rasped, eyes glittering. You called me friend. You begged me to listen when no one else would, and I did. The nurse frowned. Doctor, what is he saying? I ignored her. My mouth was dry. That wasn't real, I whispered. I was a child. He smiled thinly. Children make the truest pacts. Adults lie. Children bleed honesty into the dirt. The air in the room shifted. The smell of antiseptic and warmed saline thinned, replaced with something damp, earthy-like freshly turned soil. I rubbed my nose, but the scent clung, thick and undeniable. The nurse wrinkled hers. Do you smell that? Vent malfunction, I said quickly, though I knew better. The man's voice deepened. You planted me, and when the roots grew, I grew. I've been with you every day, in the silence between your breaths, in the corners of your eyes, when you thought you were alone. The monitor beeped steadily, too steadily. Every interval identical, mechanical, as if his heartbeat were no longer flesh, but something scripted. The nurse glanced nervously at me. Should we get cardiology? These waveforms are wrong. No consults, I said sharply, my tone harsher than intended, because I knew this wasn't medicine anymore. I leaned down, close enough to feel his breath against my cheek. Why now? I whispered. Why after all these years? His cracked lips curved. Because the roots have grown deep, and the earth is tired of keeping me. It's time you remember what you asked for. He coughed once, hard enough to jolt his body, and a smear of dirt, not blood, not phlegm. Dirt spattered against the inside of his oxygen mask. The nurse gasped. What the hell? I pulled the mask away, my pulse hammering. His teeth and gums were streaked brown, his tongue coated with grit. He smiled through it. Dig, Khan, he whispered, grains of soil falling from his lips. Or I'll dig for you. The monitor flatlined for half a second, then sprang back stronger. And in the silence that followed, I swear I heard it faint, far away, the scrape of a spoon against earth. The sound was faint at first metal, on packed clay, rhythmic, patient. A sound I hadn't heard in decades, yet my body remembered it. Knees pressed into dirt, palms raw, that spoon from my grandmother's kitchen, bending against stone as I dug. Except this wasn't memory. It was now. The scrape echoed in the ICU, too sharp to be imagined, reverberating through the metal bed frame beneath my hands. The nurse clutched the counter. Doctor, what is that? Nothing, I said, though the lie broke in my throat. The man wheezed against his oxygen, lips curling, soil crusted in the corners of his mouth. You hear it, don't you? They're still digging, still hungry. I snapped, harsher than I meant. Shut up. The nurse's eyes widened. I never raised my voice. But he only grinned wider, teeth streaked with dirt. You buried more than words that night, Khan. You buried me. Your hate, your rage, and I grew. The scent of earth thickened, clinging to my tongue until it tasted like mud. The nurse gagged, covering her nose. Why does it smell like soil in here? I gripped the rail so hard the metal bit into my palm. Ventilation, I muttered, but even as I said it, I knew no vent carried this. This was personal, targeted. The monitor beeped, steady as a metronome. Knock, knock. The rhythm was no longer just a sound. It was in my chest. My pulse matched it, every beat like a fist against bone. The man leaned forward, strength surging where none should exist. His eyes gleamed with wet darkness. "Say it," he whispered. I swallowed hard. "Say what?" "The words you buried, the ones you carved into paper with shaking hands. Say them to me." I shook my head. No. The lights above us flickered violently. The 4 pumps shrieked in alarm, then froze mid-cycle, numbers locked on its screen. The nurse backed into the corner, muttering prayers under her breath. He reached for me again, his hand stronger than any shocked patient's should be, his grip burning cold on my sleeve. Dirt crumbled from his fingernails onto the blanket. "You asked for me once," he rasped. "Ask again, or I'll show her what you did." My breath caught. Her who? His cracked grin split wider. The nurse. Everyone. All of them. "I'll tell them how you begged me to take him. I'll tell them how you meant it." The memory slammed into me. My father, slumped on the kitchen floor hours after I'd buried that jar, clutching his chest while my mother screamed. I had whispered into the dirt, "Take him," and something had answered. Now, 34 years later, it was demanding I speak those words again. The scrape of the spoon grew louder, echoing from nowhere and everywhere. The monitor beeped in rhythm. My chest pounded until I couldn't tell if it was my heart or his. And for the first time in decades, I felt the dirt under my nails again. The scrape of the spoon grew sharper, metal grinding against stone, though there was no spoon, no dirt, no fig tree in this sterile ICU. Still, every nerve in my body insisted I was back there kneeling in the soil, pressing my anger into the earth. The man's grip on my sleeve tightened, his nails biting through the fabric. Clumps of soil dropped onto the sheet, scattering across his gown. "You buried once," he rasped. "Now you must bury again." The nurse shook her head, trembling. "Doctor, he's hallucinating. It's impossible." But I saw her face twist as the smell hit her too. Rich, damp soil, wet with rain. The scent filled the room until it pressed into our throats, heavy and suffocating. I pulled free of his grip, my voice hoarse. "No, I was a child. I didn't mean it." His smile stretched, black grit between his teeth. "Children always mean it. That's why they're strong. Strong enough to call me." My heart slammed. "Call you for what?" He leaned closer, oxygen mask fogging with each ragged breath. "For removal, for silence, for sacrifice." The nurse gasped. "Sacrifice? What is he?" "Don't listen to him," I snapped, though my own voice shook. The man chuckled, the sound wet and hollow. "You've carried me for decades, Khan. You fed me with every unspoken wish. Every moment you clenched your jaw and swallowed rage. But hunger grows. Soil dries. Roots spread. Now something else must be planted." The lights overhead flickered again, casting shadows that bent unnaturally along the walls. For a moment, I swore I saw roots dark, twisting shapes threading across the ceiling tiles, reaching for me. The nurse whimpered, clutching the counter. "Doctor, what is this? What's happening?" I couldn't answer. My gaze locked on the patient. He whispered, slow and deliberate, "Bury her." The words hollowed me out. "What?" He nodded toward the nurse, his eyes gleaming. "She's here. She's listening. You can't let her leave this room. Secrets rot in the open air. You know what must be done." "You've done it before." The nurse flinched back, her face pale. "Doctor, he's not serious, right? Please tell me this is delirium." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But the smell of earth was choking me. The scrape of the spoon was deafening, and his words were burrowing into the oldest part of me, the child who had whispered hate into the ground and watched his father collapse that same night. He coughed hard, dirt spilling from his mouth onto the sheets. Then, in a voice that was not only his, but layered with mine, my 9-year-old voice, trembling and angry, he said, "Dig, or I'll choose for you." The sound of the spoon against earth grew louder, so loud I could swear it was scraping inside my skull. The ICU walls thinned, dissolving into the smell of rain-soaked soil and cigarette smoke. My stomach dropped. I knew that smell. The man's voice rasped over the monitor beeps. "Let me remind you." And suddenly, I wasn't in the trauma bay anymore. I was back in my grandmother's kitchen, age 9, crouched on the tile while thunder rattled the windows. My father slumped in the chair, bottle on the table, his chest heaving like every breath was a battle. His face red, sweating, furious at the world, had twisted toward me. "Useless boy," he had spat, and I had run. Out the back door, into the storm. The fig tree bent with the wind, branches clawing at the sky. I dug with the spoon, fingers bleeding in the wet clay, shoved the note into the jar, and pressed it down into the hole. Tears blurred the storm as I whispered the words I wasn't supposed to say out loud. "Take him. Take him away." And the ground seemed to answer. The ICU came back in flashes, the nurse gasping, clutching my arm. "Doctor, snap out of it. You're scaring me." But I could still see the kitchen behind her. My father clutching his chest, collapsing to the floor. My mother screaming his name. The patient on the bed smiled with broken teeth, dirt dribbling down his chin. "You called me that night, and I came." The nurse's eyes darted between us. "Doctor, what is he talking about? What is he saying to you?" The man's gaze shifted toward her. His lips moved, and suddenly it wasn't his voice anymore. It was mine, a child's voice echoing through the years. "Take her too. Bury her too." The nurse staggered back, horror twisting her face. "That was you? Doctor, that was your voice." My heart thudded like it wanted out of my chest. I shook my head violently. "No, that wasn't me." The patient's grin widened. "You've already learned, Khan. Sacrifice once, and the roots grow hungry. They want more." The walls of the ICU groaned, shadows bleeding long across the monitors. The smell of soil thickened until I gagged on it. The nurse whispered, "We have to get out of here." She reached for the door. The man's voice dropped to a guttural growl. "If she leaves, your secret leaves too." The spoon scraped again, louder, harder, like it was digging beneath my feet. And I realized, with a sinking dread, that the choice wasn't about then anymore. It was about now. The monitors wailed, not with alarms I knew, but in that steady rhythm again. Knock, knock. Each tone drilled into my chest until my own pulse stumbled into sync. The patient leaned forward, despite the lines tethering him, his voice shredded but triumphant. "The earth remembers bargains, Khan, and it demands another." The nurse tugged my sleeve, panicked. "Doctor, he's not making sense. We need psych, we need security." But I could barely hear her over the scrape of metal on soil, echoing in my skull. The garden, the spoon. My father gasping in the kitchen while I pressed dirt over glass. "You chose once," the man rasped, eyes fixed on mine. "And he fell. Now choose again." His head lolled toward the nurse, and a broken smile spread across his dirt-streaked lips. "Her. Bury her, or your secret opens to every mouth in this place." The nurse froze, color draining from her face. What does he mean?" He doesn't know anything, I snapped, too fast, too harsh. The man's laugh was hollow, wet. Oh, but I do. Shall I tell her? He turned, lips moving, but the sound that came was not his own. It was my mother's voice, weak, accusing. He asked me to take his father. My knees weakened. Stop. The nurse's hand trembled on my arm. Doctor, is this true? What's happening? The patient's eyes glinted, pupils swallowing the light. One choice, Khan, one burial. Or the whole world will hear what you wished for. The smell of soil thickened until it clogged my throat. The walls pressed closer, shadows stretching long like roots. I staggered back, fighting for air. The nurse whispered, terrified, Doctor, please, please tell me this isn't real. But the scrape of the spoon was deafening now, digging, as if it were under the floor, clawing up through the foundation. The man's whisper slid into my ear, though he hadn't moved. Sacrifice or exposure? One or the other. Choose. The monitors shrieked all at once, their waveforms flattening into jagged soil-colored lines. The lights overhead flickered violently, plunging the room into red and shadow. And in the silence between the beeps, I heard it her voice again, my mother's. Don't fall asleep, Khan. Not again. The ultimatum hung heavy in the air. Dig or be dug up. The nurse lunged for the door. I'm calling security. The lights snapped off before she could touch the handle. The ICU sank into red glow, machines stuttering their impossible rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. The patient sat up straighter, no longer weak, no longer shivering. His chest rose with steady power, eyes black pits that drank the light. Soil smeared his gown, poured in clumps from the lines in his arms. Stay, he rasped. Secrets belong in the ground. The nurse cried out, slamming her fists on the glass. Doctor, help me, please. My legs refused to move. I could only watch as the man's lips stretched wider, the grin obscene. Tell her, Khan. Tell her what you buried. I didn't, my voice cracked, useless. But he drowned me out. His words thundered, layered with my child voice, with my mother's rasp, with something older still. He wished his father gone. He whispered it into dirt. He gave me blood in the soil, and I answered. The nurse spun toward me, horror in her eyes. My God, is it true? I opened my mouth, but nothing came. My throat clamped shut. My heart pounded the rhythm of the knock, as if it too belonged to him. The patient's voice dropped low, intimate. Confess, and she leaves. Deny me, and she stays buried. The shadows thickened, curling around the nurse's legs like roots, dragging her shoes against the floor. She screamed, clawing at the counter, her body pulled inch by inch toward the bed. Doctor, please. I staggered forward, torn in two. The child in me, the one who pressed dirt over glass, wanted to scream the truth, spill it all, anything to end this. The man I was, the doctor, wanted to deny it, to cling to reason, to save her. The patient's eyes glowed with triumph. Choose, Khan. Dig again, or I dig for you. The scraping spoon roared, deafening now, shaking the floor. The monitor flatlined, but the beeping continued anyway, 3 tones, perfectly spaced. The nurse's nails scraped furrows in the counter as the shadows wrapped higher, dragging her down. Her eyes locked on mine, wide with terror. Doctor, say something. Please say it. And for the first time since childhood, I felt the dirt under my fingernails again. The word pressed itself to my lips, the same word I had buried all those years ago. Take. The soil smell suffocated the room. The nurse thrashed, shadows binding her ankles, dragging her toward the patient's bed like roots tightening around prey. She screamed, raw terror cutting through the mechanical beeps. Doctor, please say something. The patient's eyes blazed black, his voice a guttural chorus. Say it, Khan. You remember the word. You remember the night. Speak it again, and she will be mine. Deny it, and I will show her everything. My throat worked like I'd swallowed glass. The memory of that night pressed down, my father collapsing, my mother's cry, the note in the green jar. Take him. And now the words sat on my tongue like a curse that never left. The nurse reached for me, fingers clawing the air. Don't let it take me. You're not like him. You're not that boy anymore. But wasn't I? Hadn't I proved, at 9 years old, what I was capable of asking for? The patient leaned closer, dirt dribbling from his cracked lips. You're still that boy, still mine. One more word and the soil will close. Just one. The spoon scrape roared like thunder. My head filled with it, pounding behind my eyes, driving me to the edge. My lips parted, the word trembling there. Take. But then my mother's voice cut through, faint, fractured, yet unmistakable. Khan, don't fall asleep. I froze, not a command to bury, not a demand to choose. A warning, stay awake, stay aware. Don't give in. The patient snarled, shadows writhing. She can't save you. She's already gone. I forced the word back down, choking it. My chest heaved. No, I whispered, voice shaking. Not this time. I won't say it. I won't bury anyone again. The nurse sobbed, the roots tightening. The patient's grin cracked wider, furious now. Then you both stay with me forever. The lights exploded white, monitors shrieking in one long, endless tone. The room shook as if the hospital itself were ripping open. And I knew part 12 would be the end, whether I held my silence or surrendered the word. The shriek of the monitors filled every corner of the ICU. The smell of soil was so thick I could taste it, grit grinding between my teeth. The nurse's cries tore through the red-lit haze as the shadows climbed her body like vines. The patient leaned forward, eyes bottomless, voice swelling until it rattled the glass. Speak the word, Khan. One more burial, or the earth swallows you both. The spoon scrape in my head was deafening now, metal against stone, each drag pulling me back to that night. My 9-year-old self on bleeding knees, whispering into dirt. Take him. My lips trembled. The word was there. Take. But my mother's voice cut through again, soft, breaking, but alive inside me. Stay awake, Khan. Don't close your eyes this time. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms. No, I whispered, louder this time, shaking my head. I won't bury anyone again. The shadows froze. The nurse gasped, still trapped, but the pressure eased. The patient's smile cracked into something darker, his voice rising in a furious chorus. Then you come with me. The bed collapsed inward, frame groaning, as if it were being dragged into the ground itself. Soil poured from the mattress, spilling onto the tiles, swallowing the sheets, the monitors, the man. His body convulsed, arms reaching out, pulling the darkness with him. The nurse screamed as the roots snapped back, releasing her. She scrambled to the far corner, eyes wide, clutching her chest. The patient's head lolled back, his mouth opening one last time. Dirt spilled out with his final words. You planted me. Now you lie beside me. The floor beneath the bed split open with a crack that echoed like thunder. For one dizzying moment, I saw the jar-green glass, whole, unbroken, sitting among roots that twisted like fingers. My childish handwriting still legible inside. Then it was gone, swallowed by the dark. The bed, the patient, the soil all vanished. The room sealed itself, sterile tiles shining under flickering light as if nothing had happened, except for me. I was on my knees, breath ragged, dirt under my nails. The nurse whispered, trembling. Doctor, what was that? I couldn't answer. My throat locked, my eyes fixed on the floor. Because deep beneath the tiles, I still heard it 3 faint knocks. Patient, steady, waiting. Knock, knock. The thing I buried wasn't gone. It was just waiting for me to fall asleep again.